reschedule with me, that would have been fine if you're not feeling good. But hey, let's do it.
We are good. We're good. Good to go. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihon. And as you guys are popping on, you can see that we have the lovely Brad Olsen back with us. We had around one, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago-ish, and had some tech issues. So hopefully this will be a little bit easier for people to hear and not sound like a robot. But welcome back, Brad. We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you for having me back, and sorry about those tech problems last time. Once in a while it happens. It's like things getting lost in the mail. 1 in 20, you just don't know what happened, and c'est la vie, have to resend another one.
Yes. Well, I guess the aliens didn't like what we were talking about, or the military, or whoever is listening. I don't know. Anyway, so we were actually talking about your trip to Antarctica, and we were also talking about your books, which last time we were on, I had one of those books, but now I have 2 of 3. Actually, you have 10 books? So I don't have
3 in the series.
Yeah. So I would love for you to discuss with us a little bit, especially about this one. I'm really psyched about, Prison Planet edition. I wonder, where in the world did you get the idea that we might be in a prison planet?
Oh, there are so many references to it. Alex Jones on InfoWars has used that term, prison planet, but I see it back. Do you remember the alien autopsy video that came out about 15 years ago? There's also a transcript of it. There's also a YouTube video you can listen along. In many references, the ET calls this prison planet. And I remember reading that, and it was actually very influential for the second book in the series that you don't have, Future Esoteric, The Unseen Realms, that it instilled in my mind that a lot of incarnate souls and from all over the galaxy get stuck here, get put here as a penal colony. And in so much as exploring this whole concept of who we are and what we're here for, coming across more and more information about the prison planet, even to the point where I have people sending me materials, including this gentleman. I'm just reaching into my laptop to grab it. Haven't read the whole thing yet, but Delmar Dualviz, he's got a whole bunch of stuff on Prison Planet. So much so, and I rarely do this, but I take this on my flights and I highlight a few things, and you might be able to see I've highlighted a few things about the Prison Planet, because it's so well written, and I do mean to write back to him and thank him for sending that to me. His whole notion that Earth is a penal colony, not in the way that we think, that you're behind bars and you're serving time for a crime you haven't committed, but more like you are here as a soul in a body, and when you die, think about all the mystery there is about when we pass, that you're not going to be able to leave here so easily, and that you have your memory swiped. And that was another thing that was a very prominent feature in the alien autopsy, alien interview, that she said that when we see the light at the end of the tunnel, like moths to a flame, we head to it. Almost invariably, everybody does. And that's actually a soul trap, and it will swipe the memory. So everybody is born with amnesia, and that's part of why this is a prison planet. My older brother and younger sister are both involved in Scientology, and interestingly enough, they confirm the same findings, that there is an amnesia mechanism just right outside the Earth, including on the moon, that is this soul trap that will swipe the memory of everybody between lifetimes. Now, the Egyptians, if we're going to talk about reincarnation or what happens after we die, they call it the bardo. In Western biblical terms, they call it that you're in this state between lives. What is it? What's the word? It starts with a P. Christian
Purgatory.
terms, purgatory.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting that East and West has versions of the same thing, where souls that are just basically between lifetimes are in a period of judgment. Now, I would go a little bit further and say it's not St. Peter at the pearly gates who's judging us, but it's really us judging ourselves. That is, we're doing a life review and we're looking at everything that we've done in our lifetimes. And some of that has created harm to other people, to other things, even animals. And every time we do that harm, we will feel it in the life review. And
Wow.
it's going to be the point where you're going to think, I can't do that anymore. Now, if you can realize this in the lifetime that you're in right now, this is what I call the philosopher's stone, as it means to me, that if you realize that everything you do in the world today as a living being has consequences, and these are the laws of karma, and they're very real, and they are throughout the universe, that you're not going to do bad things anymore. You're not going to hurt anyone or anything. In fact, you're going to completely change your way of thinking and be in service to all in every way you can, because it will be in your life review all the good and the bad that you've done. And heaven forbid you happen to kill someone out of malice or anger, you're definitely coming back to
Wow.
this prison planet. And guess what? You may have to be killed or harmed or murdered in the same way that you committed it. So again, knowing this and embracing it in your life, and going from even the thought of doing harm or ill will to anyone or anything, switching that around to only being in service to all and only good. And I always give $1 to a homeless and little old lady crossing the street kind of thing. Hey, I was a Boy Scout. I learned how to be prepared. And it's those kind of things that I think will prepare you for this reckoning period after you live. And that's how I think we escape Prison Planet, by being the absolute best human being we can be in this lifetime, in the very short blip that we have. And that was the other thing that the alien interview made very clear, is that we have very short lifetimes, and it's designed that way on purpose. And that's also part of the amnesia, that we're only here for 70, 80 years, and you come back, you know nothing. But sometimes children, real little children, will have those insights into where they were just recently as a spirit, and also sometimes their past lives. In the first book in the esoteric series that you have in Modern Esoteric, I have a chapter on reincarnation. And what was very compelling for me when I was putting this together, compiling my own belief system on this subject, and I spent many years in Asia as an English teacher in Japan for 14 months, and then backpacking around right after that trip for another year or so, including about 6 months in India and Nepal, where in India, it's called the most spiritual country in the world for a reason.
Mhm.
People are very, very interested and involved in these kind of things, and life and death is very stark there. It's the first time I've seen people starving and dying in the streets. It's really in your face there. So having the Eastern philosophy, as I was putting this book together and getting into this reincarnation chapter, and using examples of children who could remember their past lives quite clearly, and fortunately having parents and even some therapists who would help them remember those memories, and sometimes even solving their own murders from a past life, knowing where the body's buried, knowing who the parents were, knowing who the murderer was, and IDing them successfully, and sometimes in Indian court of laws, putting that person behind bars in the real prison planet there. So just there's just so many stories like that. And even in the Western world of people who have technically passed away and start rising up and seeing their body laying there, and call them what you will, but we do seem to have angels or guardians or loved ones who watch over us in these bodies, in these lifetimes, meeting them, long lost relatives as well. And sometimes being sent back, told that your time is not up. You still have a purpose here. So coming back from being clinically dead, but then having the recollection of that event and being able to say, well, I went into the other room of the hospital and I observed a doctor and a nurse having a conversation about X, Y, and Z. And then asking those doctor and nurses, were you having a conversation at this time about X, Y, and Z? And they said, yes, we were. And how could you have possibly have known that? I said, well, I didn't know that. The person who had a near-death experience did. So many examples about that. And I should let you know in your audience that I grew up without any kind of religion or any kind of doctrine or dogma whatsoever. Both of my parents, Lutheran dad, Catholic mom, they just dropped out of those faiths and decided kids are just going to learn what the kids want to learn. Just let them do what they want. And I was the one that traveled around the world and just like a empty chalkboard filled that in with my own experiences. And Sharnael, the first time I went to Europe, pretty much an atheist. I didn't believe anything. And maybe that's a good thing, coming at it with no belief. But the first time I backpacked around Europe, I found myself in some very old parts of cities around a cathedral. But the first time I recall it happening was in Pompeii, which was a city in Italy that got completely covered with ash and debris from a volcano, Mount Vesuvius erupting. I believe the year was 79 AD, and just completely flash covered that city and another small one called Herculaneum on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. But when I was in Pompeii, which has largely been excavated, I knew my way around. I knew where I was. I knew how to get to places. I was with a friend. I said, let's go to the Colosseum. It's up here to the road and to the right. Never been there before, but knew my way around. And the hair started sticking up on my arms, and I was getting like this spiritual discharge, I think is the best way to put it. And just, wow, I know something about this. How could I know this? So then I started really examining reincarnation and our soul journey. And I love that bumper sticker that says, we're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're spirits having the human experience. And that human experience is being pretty well trapped here on the prison planet.
Yes.
So I hope that helps clarify. You know, one thing I like to do in my interviews, if you'd entertain me, is since the subtitle is Escaping Prison Planet, I've given you a partial explanation of what I think that means. If you feel like you could enlighten me and the audience with what you think Prison Planet is and how one would escape, I'd love to hear it.
Well, that's a big topic for sure. I had written down some notes actually, because like how you said, you know, we're given the chance during this time and, you know, maybe even multiple times, but you know, I have a book too. I'll have to send it to you. It's called The Science of Miracles. And it talks a lot about the science of our code and our biofield. And, you know, what it's 6 to 8 feet out of us. And what's projected into the field is a combination of what we're thinking about, talking about, what we're feeling. But also we have our signature DNA projection that each of us contain. Now, you mentioned, you know, having to redo things or what have you, or having that review. You know, we have the option to do that review here because things are projected within our DNA out, and then they bring a match to us through the code. We only get what we are. So like if you've got a poverty issue or you lied or you did something, like it comes back, it goes out in code. Let's say it's a -1, 2, 3, 4. We get a match -1, 2, 3, 4. And cognitively, we can be like, I'm a good person. And maybe you didn't remember consciously that you did anything, but it still goes out and you get a match, right? So, but some of that isn't completed here and we're not aware of it, like you said. And there's that cognitive part where maybe we're not even the ones who did it, but it could be a DNA issue from our ancestors that we incarnate into it. And then we are living, the poverty or the lifestyle or whatever the situation is, dis-ease or things like that come back. And then our job is to identify it, hopefully, and clear it and work it out, because epigenetics is really real. But I think there's a big piece with genetic memory too, where you said the kids, I have found in my studies that, there are a lot of kids are more aware and can remember some of this a little bit more in the code or the packaging. But yeah, through regressions, I work with Barbara Lamb and Mary Rodwell and some of these others too, that, it's like, how much of this is genetic memory? How much is it like, it could be a lot of different things. And so, but yeah, as far as the prison planet, in some ways, we're all there more than what we really think anyway, because it's like that 1% of the top people who have all the money and the tech and the control, they're just making sure that we have like our soap operas, through, whether it's through Mockingbird or Celebrity This or sports or all these great arenas. As long as we got our like cell phones in our TikTok and whatever, we'll just like scoot around and do our little thing and be so distracted, like where they're, the guy behind the curtain, controlling all of this stuff. So in some ways we definitely can be already in a prison planet just based on that, while we're thinking we actually own stuff and doing stuff and have a choice. But yet, are we, and do we, and what's really going on? So there's that too. But going back to like the scriptures, I had interviewed a few people on like flat earth versus round earth, and that's a whole nother subject. But someone kept referring to one of the scriptures that had to do with the earth being a sphere. And I remember when I looked up the word sphere, it wasn't even sphere. I'm trying to remember the word that it was. I want to say it was like dome, or it inferred prison planet. It actually it actually inferred prison planet. I was like, wait a minute, are you for real? Like, and I look at scriptures as like quantum physics. I grew up nothing to, my dad was Lutheran and whatever, but they didn't really go. And then I jumped into moving here in the States. And there's a lot more people. I lived in Europe for a while, and then coming back here, it was more like, especially in the South, more religious type setting, and really went to Bible school and did the whole thing, and did ministry. And I love God. I believe in source. And I also, have different ideas than I did before. So, but yeah, it is interesting as a scientist to look at not only what we are projecting to get back to learning, just for that whole learning piece. I've interviewed quite a few people who've had near-death experiences. I've had my own version. And one of my mentors, Bob Jones, he's had 2. And his big thing is when he died and saw the light and whatever, he said that God came to him and told him, "Did you learn to love?" And so for me, it's about, to get to escape. I don't know what escape is. I was hoping you would tell me, but I would think it has some sort of aspect of like actually understanding love on some level and having that piece of unconditional love, even for ourselves. To love ourselves unconditionally. I just went through this whole thing where it was like, I realized that I had hated somebody. And, in our programming, we're taught, well, God's love, so it's not good to hate people. And then I'm like, and someone brought it to my attention, well, God hated. And I was like, really? And I start realizing, yeah, God did hate. It's okay to hate. And when we hold hate, it encapsulates and holds space in the body. And so therefore there's less room for God. But when we own it and identify it and go like, you know what? Yeah, I hate and I'm pissed off and whatever, then it actually transmutes it, squishes it, and leaves more room for God. So did we learn to love? It's just like, to me, the whole exercise of loving unconditionally, even when we hate, even when we have a feeling, because if you only love yourself when you're, quote, good and love everyone and, don't have fear and all that stuff, then that's conditional. So, that's a big question. I mean, it really is. And you mentioned Scientology. Ron Hubbard, actually, he worked a lot with MK Ultra. And his books, especially his first book, is really astounding. I'm not a Scientologist. I don't agree with where it went, but he actually did a lot to help people with all the programming and the brainwashing and what have you. So he, kudos to that. But yeah, Prison Planet.
Good explanation.
Is there a way out?
Yeah.
I think that the way out would be, smashing the cabal and us coming up higher and in our own evolution and our own being. And you mentioned messengers or angels, which I guess by definition are messengers, aliens. I don't know, aliens, angels. What's your take on that?
Combination of all the above. And when we talk about the multi-dimensions, there is so much potential for that to be so much wider and more vast than we can possibly comprehend in this very dense third dimensional world that we're locked in. And that's part of the escape is, are we prepared to be in a spiritual realm again? Are we prepared to see those people? Are we prepared to receive them with love and gratitude? Or are we going to exit this lifetime fearful and angry at the world for whatever else? There's so many excuses we could make for doing what we do. Well, that person did me harm. But the pain you carry with you is the pain that you will have during this life review. I do believe that is absolutely true. And just let me clarify, even though I did not grow up learning scripture, reading the Bible, looking at all the mysteries contained within, when I started working on these esoteric books, I have an absolute whole new appreciation for Christianity, teachings of Christ. And I'll tell you, Dr. Sharnael, I have a book called The Parallel Teachings of Buddha and Jesus. And they are so identical in so many different ways. How can you have a whole thick book of parallel teachings on the spread? This is what Buddha said. This is what Jesus said. And you just read them both side by side. And I'll tell you, it's incredible because the truth is a constant. The truth remains the truth no matter what through time. You can wrap it up. You could put lipstick on a pig. You can do whatever you want to it. That all will eventually fall away, as we are seeing now with so much injustice and so much untruths in the world are just falling away. They can't hold ground. That's why propaganda never can be the solution. It's a temporary fix to try to get you through these controllers who use the media to get them through a certain situation or problem. But eventually it is seen for what it is. And that's why I have a completely newfound belief and respect in Christianity, a respect for Christians who I think in this country are really the warriors of light, doing the great work to help try to correct the problems we see this country in today. Much like the Buddhists have been a way to correct illegitimate governments in Eastern countries. Do you remember during the Vietnam War, there would be Buddhist monks that would light themselves on fire right in front of our troops in downtown Saigon The men couldn't understand it. How could somebody possibly do this? This is a religious figure, even a religious head, who is doing it in protest. And while, of course, I could never advocate taking one's life, it just shows how
committed.
Yeah, well, how deeply embedded that person's belief system was with the injustice of this foreign invader in their country, and feeling like this is the only thing I can possibly do to raise attention for my people and the cause that's going on here. And when that broadcast over in America on our TV during the Vietnam War, it made a very deep impression. I was one of the first backpackers to get into Vietnam in January 1993. It had only opened up a few months before. I saw Ken Burns, was a 10-part series on the Vietnam War. And at the very end, they said it was only in June 92 that the last POWs and the last people who were in the re-education camps were released. And I went to some of those re-education camps, and they still had a picture of not Mao Zedong, but who is it? The leader in South Vietnam. Still kind of waking up, having my coffee. It'll come. And I laid in some of the lion cages, the re-education camps. Humans have been so cruel to each other. One thing I learned by going to old prisons and seeing the stacks of skulls in Cambodia, we've been just so cruel to each other. And I think that's another reason why this is Prison Planet, is it really has no effect in the lifetime. You can pull out a gun and you can kill someone. You can go on the dark web and hire an assassination for $1,000. Is our life really that cheap? And that people would do it is the amazing thing. I remember just seeing over the weekend 2 young teens gunned down in Oakland this weekend, and then 4 the weekend before, and it just goes on and on and on. And Chicago had happened too. How have we gotten to the point where our life is so cheap now? And you watch television. I don't watch television. I can't watch television. It's too disturbing to me. The frequency it emits is it's painful for me to sit down and watch more than 15 minutes of mainstream news these days. But the programming is such that, it's okay to show violence and killing and drugs and prostitution and all these vices that are like they're glorified when you do that. But when you talk about some of the subjects we talk about, that's forbidden, then we get censored. So you can see how everything is inverted. Everything has gone backwards. What's really important. Can you imagine if we had started to learn about our past lives or reincarnation when we were little kids, when we were encouraged to remember those memories, write them down, take videotapes so we could look at and review later? But that's not the case. We're not given the tools we need to be these ascending human beings. So in my case, it has taken me to this point of just basically studying and working. And this book took me 6 years to write to get to this point where I know what I know. And then I still realize there's still so much more to know. It will be lifetime upon lifetime if I can remember what I take with us. And I just wanted to your point about the escape part. Well, in the Eastern countries, they say that people who come back here to aid the human race, who have already reached a state of enlightenment that the Buddha spoke of, that almost all Buddhists seek to attain within their lifetime, they say the people that have done that, they have the option whether they want to come back or not. Plenty of them don't. Plenty of them just care to either be reincarnated in another civilization that is not so stark in the contrast, or they'll come back here as what's known as bodhisattvas. And that is an enlightened master who has so much love and compassion for the world and the human race that they'll come back as a master incarnated and do what they can to help in this lifetime. Some of them get trapped and lost and lose their mission or forget about it. But many who do come back and remember it, especially in Buddhist monasteries, like the same way that they go and select the new Dalai Lama when he passes. They go through a bunch of tests to find out who is the true Dalai Lama, and then that becomes their spiritual leader. In the West, we don't really have a model for that. We're taught that all that matters is the person who dies with the most toys wins. Mm-hmm. The materialistic trappings of, oh, well, you're not really that good unless you drive a really fancy car and you live in a big house and you need the finances for the romances, buddy. And what are you doing writing books, selling them for $20 when you could have been writing computer code? You'd be a millionaire by now. Believe me, those are thoughts that I've had. But staying true to myself and knowing what I know and having the great privilege and honor to be able to travel all around the world. Now I've been to all 7 continents. To me, that becomes my power. That becomes my bodhisattva in this lifetime, to say, I have been so honored and privileged to be able to do what I've done. Still a pretty healthy young guy, even though I'm about to turn 56, start my 3rd Saturn return. I feel like I just want to keep doing more, and I will do more. And I have made many agreements with myself that I will only do good for this world as long as I'm here. And that's my escape from Prison Planet, and said in another way.
I like it. I guess it goes back to like contracts. I had an encounter when I've had several miscarriages, and at one point there's a lady named Akiana. She was a young kid at the time, and she had painted this beautiful picture of Jesus Christ, and she gave me a copy, and she was talking about the children and how they're around me. And anyway, it's a long thing, but I went to this place where they had these like orb-like beings, and I knew that they were basically signing up to come to Prison Planet, if you want to call it that, within the dome or the realm. And they would come down with these scrolls that they had signed off on in their contracts to come. And, you know, I think that there's like a, you know, you talked about genetic memory. And the thing about tech is no matter how many times or what we're doing, whether it's ancestral or us or whatever, there's something tangible to truth and love. And even though things aren't talked about or spoken about, whether it's aliens, UFOs, or, you know, lies are presented, there's something about our technology that can still decipher what's bullshit and what isn't. And I think they forget about that human tech part of us that's like, you know what, that's not true. I don't know what's right necessarily, but I know that that isn't of a vibe that I can put in the truth box right there. And, you know, we have that technology. We have it. I like that you brought up the parallel of Buddhism and Christ, too, because, and I have to get that book. When I looked up at the studies, I was finding there was over 500 quotes by Jesus that actually came from his teachings. You know, not to mention emerald tablets and other things, you know, which, and I love the Bible, but I wish that they would cite where some of these quotes are, because that would, again, would be, make it ethical and truthful to say, like, I'm saying this, but I'm actually repeating, because that's just what you do in ethical writing is, like, if you are quoting someone, you infer and cite who said it, but it's not all written there. So I think there's a little bit of, I don't know, deception in that, of like not being completely honest where everything came from. Anyway, but so I like the parallel because truth is tangible. Truth can be felt. Truth is an energy, and you can feel it in the field. You know what's going on. You can walk in and meet people and be like, oh, I really like that guy, or I don't like that guy. And it's all about, like, do they have love? Are they walking in truth? How are they carrying themselves? How do they treat other people? And, you know, I think one time in 2010, I had an encounter with these two beings, whatever you want to call them, angels, which are messengers or whatever. But one of the things that they said to me, and I get emotional every time, is when they were about to go, one of them, whew, it's happening. But they looked straight at me and they said, tell them they're not truly living unless they're living true. And when they said that, and even when I say it now, I feel it like in my body. And it was an immediate upgrade in my physical, tangible body of knowing like that we have this technology and that we can live true. We can embody truth by everything that we do, everything we say, everything we eat, everyone we hang out with, and going back to those contracts of what we are here for in this season, in this time. And, you know, I think that if we could tap into that, because everybody's different, everyone's got their different thing. Like you said, you can't go write code. You could, but that wouldn't be true to you. You would be off your contract. It would be out of, you know, and there's a physical thing that happens when we're not true. There are chemicals that release from our body that cause us to be weak. We don't digest, our metabolism goes back, you know, all these things. But then there's this other chemical when we are in that pocket of truth that gives us ultra human strength that really sets us in a high immunity system and helps us to do, you know, leap tall buildings in a single bound or whatever, you know. So when we're living true moment to moment to moment, whatever that is, whoever we're with and whatever we eat, drink, whatever, then there's a tangible integrity that supports this technology. And then when we don't, you know, whether it's like hanging out with the wrong person, eating the wrong stuff, working too hard, not taking care of ourselves, you know, whatever, then we can go downhill from that too. But anyway, so I like that you brought in the comparison to scalar waves can catch up all that. Jesus has the highest scalar waves, but interestingly enough, Christians don't have high scalar waves. So the Buddhism followers actually had higher scalar waves. The people who practiced Buddhism had higher scalar waves than Christians, but Christ had the higher scalar wave than Buddha. So I don't know. I mean, it's about, again, embodying truth and living true and like following through. And thank God we have some really good people that have high integrity and that are living true no matter what it is. You know, I think it's everyone has their own path, and it's just making sure we're always following it to a T, you know. Care to respond?
Oh, sure. First of all, I opened the chat. I'm not logged in, so I just sent you a private chat. I have the YouTube video of the alien interview. If you could put that up for me, so the people.
Oh my gosh, yes, thank
that
you.
out. And Ho Chi Minh City. Thank you for someone in the chat room that said that. That is still the name of Saigon, Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh was the Mao Zedong of China in Vietnam, and that was his picture we saw in some of those re-education camps. There was a website that I created right after my trip called stompers.com, and it is the chronicle of my 3-year trip around the world, and it has pictures from Vietnam. And I think there's some of us sitting in a re-education camp. It had just opened up. Sharnael, so I know we want to talk about Antarctica too, and that was an incredible travel story. But when people ask me, I've been to 40 some countries, which were the most memorable. Well, you got the Great Pyramids and Angkor Wat, just incredible ruins. Everybody should see these things. But then there are some experiences that are very much at the moment. And so we were the very first backpackers to get in. Within months, they had just opened up. And I was there with 2 Australian English teachers who I was Ego no Sensei teaching English with in Japan. We met in Saigon on New Year's Eve, 1992. And then for the full month of January, traveled around Vietnam. And so we immediately had to get you had to have a passport with a visa and a travel permit. And on the travel permit, it had to have all the different locations that you wanted to go to. And fortunately, my 2 buddies had researched it and knew these places we were going to go. And at the end of the trip, we're heading out towards the Cambodia border. There's this town called Tay Ninh, and it has this very unusual temple with a seeing eye, just an eye in a pyramid, all over the place. And Victor Hugo, the famous French author, he was channeled by them, as well as other luminaries throughout history. And it was just the weirdest, trippiest town. I really don't think they had many backpackers coming through there. And a lot of places where we went, they were calling us Linkso, which means, took a while to find that out, sounded derogatory, and it kind of was, but it meant Russian. They had not seen any white people since the Russians pulled out. And the Russians had all this big monolithic building that just seemed so out of place in an Asian country. Now you kind of see more of it, but they were the first ones in after, of course, the communists won the Vietnam War, and they were invited in to help rebuild the infrastructure. So we're looking for a hotel, and it was just, we get off the bus, and it's just a mob scene of people following us around all over the place. We go into this big monolithic hotel where the hallway is 5 stories tall, and there's not a single person in there, and just one little woman behind a desk. So we're walking in. I mean, it's like a scene from a movie. We get up to her, we say, well, we'd like to rent a room. She goes, US dollars only. I said, well, we're leaving the country in a couple days. We only have Vietnamese dong. And back then it was, the highest denomination was 50 cents. So you go to the ATM or convert your traveler's checks, and you just get this big wad of Vietnamese dong. It's like Monopoly money, right? What do you do with this wad? It's too much to put in your fanny pack. It's like, okay, I'll just put it here. And yeah, they see you doing that, and they're a very poor country, and they were at the time. And she goes, no, only US dollars. We said, well, we don't have the dollars. We're not going to go to a bank. It's already around sunset. So we go back out on the street. We go, oh, let's just go find a pension or something. And all of a sudden we're mobbed again. All these people, where are you from? And there was some guy who was a older guy who was in the Vietnam War. And he knew us as Americans, or tall white guys, just assumed that I was. And he was saying, who's your commander? Where's your unit? In English. We're like, wait, dude, that was 30 years ago. We're not part of that anymore. And actually only 20 some years ago, because the Vietnam War ended in mid 70s, and we were there in 93. So it was still very fresh in the minds of people. And we could see bomb craters, and there were old blown up tanks you could climb on and lift the cannon and have just bounce down. And we were climbing through the Chu Chi tunnels, whole tunnel complex right around Saigon. That was one of the reasons why America's lost the war. They just were fighting a conventional war with unconventional guerrillas who believed in their heart that this is their country and it's worth defending. Interesting parallel here. So we go back out on the street. There's all this commotion. Then these cops drive up and they say, get in. And me and Alex are like, oh boy, what's up with this? And they're armed, and you don't argue with them. So we have to get in, and they're in these the motorcycles with a sidecar, and I'm sitting in one and Alex is in another, and then boom, we zip off, and the whole town who's been watching us the whole day walking around is like, oh wow, now the police got. We go into a compound with a pillbox and a machine gun tower, and gates open up, and we're like, oh man, what are we getting into here? And I got a bag of some pot in my pocket. I'm like, man, oh man, are we going to get out of here or what? So we're sitting in this room. It's like an interrogation room. And then this commander type policeman comes in. He can speak English. He goes, visa, passport, travel permit. And he looks at them all. And we had Tane in on the travel permit. He goes, well, what's the problem there? Why were you creating all this? So we didn't want to, but we went to the big Russian hotel and they said they wouldn't accept our Vietnamese dong, US dollars only. He goes, is that what happened? And yeah. All right, get back in. So then we get back in, and now we know, okay, we're out of trouble. And I was like, oh, turn the sirens on. Let's make a big deal. And then we could wave to people and they're like, oh, there they are again. So we go to back to this Russian hotel, and we're walking in with the cops, right? And you just see the woman just sinking in her chair. Oh, man. And they get up and they just yell at her in Vietnamese. You know, how they can get really upset and you don't understand what they're saying. And then she just looks up. She goes, we can accept your Vietnamese dong now. And so we stayed that night in the room. So it was just one of those countries where it was such a cultural shock, and then having some of the guilt of being American and seeing the atrocities that took place. In fact, they have a museum they did at the time I was there called the Museum of American War Atrocities. You know, we were used to going into a museum and seeing our side of everything, right? How about seeing it from their side about what our soldiers did to them with their version of propaganda, but probably not too far from the truth, and makes you feel like, wow, we really did some harm to these people. And coming across children who are now teenagers who are suffering from Agent Orange and other deformities. Sometimes they were half black. So a black father had impregnated a Vietnamese woman, and then they're beggars out on the street. And you could tell what a hard, hard life they're having. And it was experiences like that, Sharnael, that kind of like, not going to compare myself to the Buddha, but one of his enlightenment moments as he was on his path was when he left the palace in Nepal, and he was a prince. He was set for life, but he says, I renounce all that. I'm going to go walk the earth and see the cause of human suffering. And that's when he saw people starving and dying on the streets and the great amount of inequality, and helped him put together the whole concept of human suffering and how this is. You can see a lot of Escaping Prison Planet in Buddhist scripture as well. And so for me, coming out of a upper middle class Chicago suburb where my graduating high school class is like 97% white kids, to be put in this situation and seeing real life and death situations, I'll tell you, it was about as good of an education or better for me to do this backpacking trip as a young man, and help me formulate this fusion of East and West, which remains with me today. And people who have read my books will see that I value both viewpoints equally. Of course, I'm writing to a Western audience, and I am of this culture, but a lot of people who are hung up in life don't know what to do. I say, just get a backpack and go to Southeast Asia for a couple months. My first book is called World Stompers, a Global Travel Manifesto. It's still in print, and people still write to me every once in a while and say, I've read your book. I travel around the world, and you're right. It was the best education I ever had. I have a friend who's still in Cambodia. He still lives there. He's an expat from San Francisco. Just lost his apartment, and I said, here you go, Steve-O, read World Stompers, and he found the place where he likes to be, and he's still there. So it's a big, wide world out there. And I was often really kind of shocked and amazed at how few Americans do it. We're so much bigger than Australia or New Zealand or even the UK or Ireland, other countries that speak English, and finding them out on the backpacking trail way more than Americans, even Canadians, way more Canadians than Americans. And that's part of my philosophical journey in World Stompers, is why is it that Americans don't travel as much as other affluent Western nations? And I think we're just so indoctrinated that we have to get that college education, go right into the workforce, and then we get married, and then we get saddled with car payments and house payments, and then it's too late. And especially after you start having kids, because of course you have to do the right thing and provide for them. But I'll tell you, travel has been instrumental in developing me, who I am, and which I then in turn impart in my books, a fusion of East and West.
Well, I agree. I came up military, and so I traveled all over, but then even in ministry, went to 44 countries and lived overseas. I was actually on the east side of Berlin at 10 years old, going through all the checkpoints, seeing the terrible setup that was still over there at 10 years old. So that was, 40 years ago, where from the war, it was just completely dark, tanks everywhere, buildings still demolished, going to the museums, like you mentioned, going to the camps, I don't really know why. I was over there at 10 years old with my parents, but we went over there before the wall came down. It was literally before the Berlin Wall even came down. And so I remember thinking to myself, after going to these museums and seeing, like, basically they were just like doing like blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden the government just separates, and it's like, what happens if you have people on the other side, which happened for many, many people. But I could get that as a 10-year-old even, and still think about that, even with what's going on in the world today and how there's all these limits and different things. But yeah, there's something about travel that once you have went and seen, you get this bigger fishbowl view than that little tiny fishbowl view of seeing things and understanding people and why they may think certain ways or understand certain ways or not understand certain ways. And what I like about your books, which I haven't finished the first one yet, but I love what I've read so far, and I only have 2 of them out of the 3 in the series, is someone like you who's, definitely seasoned in all of this. You take all of what you've seen and experienced and you synthesize it in bite-sized ways to communicate it for someone who hasn't traveled, to be able to kind of look at all the different things and experiences, and to give that balance of looking at everything. Because, so many times, like you said, the propaganda is like, here's your pigeonhole of what you should see, only look here, versus, this whole spectrum of color that we can sometimes miss if we don't take action and commitment to actually do it on purpose, versus just, landing on whatever happens to go mainstream, So I do encourage you guys to get these. I encourage you guys to look up Brad and his websites. And then you have a TV thing. You've done multiple TV. You've done lots of documentaries and what have you. But didn't you just sign something? Are you allowed to talk about that? Or
we're taping next week, so I should probably refrain. But it'll be the 3rd History Channel shoot I've done this year. The other was Ancient Alien episode on Mount Shasta, which will be out in the fall, and another show called Book of Secrets, which I interview on multiple shows. You never know which ones end up on the cutting room floor, but I just put my best foot forward and see what happens, the end net result. But I've also done tons of interviews. People can search my name and find just about any subject that I talk about in the books, as well as a 16-part series on my Antarctica trip. And it's called Antarctic by Sail. And I took a sailboat down there about 2.5 years ago from Ushuaia, Argentina to the Palmer Peninsula. Was on that boat for 26 days and had a GoPro and was filming all the time. So worked with a real pro editor, and we put together Antarctica by Sail on Sci Spy TV. And that is Sedona, Arizona, new kind of like Gaia TV. And I've done a bunch of interviews with Gaia as well on Beyond Belief and some other shows, Ancient Civilizations. Happy to impart what I know. I really try not to make this about me at all. It's not about me. It's about us. So in almost all the chapters in my book are not in the first person at all. Except for in every single one of my books, and it's always seemed appropriate to put this in there. I have a opening chapter, a forward called Author's Karma Statement. And it's kind of like where I'm coming from when I write this book. And you'll see each one's a little bit different. And of course, taking on the different kind of information that I'm covering in the book, and why I felt it was necessary to include these kind of subjects in this book. Now, Beyond Esoteric had a couple chapters that were left over from Modern and Future Esoteric, which came out one right after another. I was working on this body of work. It was originally just going to be one book, and then realized I had so much material that I broke it up into 2, and then a few leftover chapters like exotic metals and crystals, which didn't quite fit in the first 2, fit in perfectly with this one, as well as another chapter called World Control, because I had some of that information in different ways in the previous books. And then, so that helped me formulate the 3 sections. Each book has 3 sections, and then beyond esoteric, it's neo-fascism is the first section. Then it goes into embargo, the truth embargo, all the subjects that have been withheld from us. And then, because I'm a optimistic and positive person, always end with a positive section, because some of this stuff goes pretty dark and can be upsetting, but I want people to know that there's hope. So the final section in Beyond Esoteric, I call it Ubermind. A lot of things that are happening to us, and not all of it is in a positive vein, such as the transhumanist agenda and Morgellon nanobots, and how we're now very much confronted with a choice whether we're going to take that jab or not, but showing very empirical evidence. And I've talked to Robert O. Young and Judy Mikovits, and I want people to make up their own mind. Don't let me influence you. Why don't you look at the evidence? Why don't you look up some of these things? And I do offer, sorry about that. Probably my next interview coming up in an hour. I do offer references on every page, and there's one. So people can see where I'm coming from. Where did I get this information? I'm not just making this up. What I do is collect data points, Sharnael. I don't watch television. I don't watch media. People ask me, oh, did you see this movie, King Kong vs. Godzilla? I'm like, it's the last thing I would waste my hour and a half doing. Oh, but they talk about Antarctica in there. Like, really? You really want me to watch it?
That's funny.
I don't lie, and I won't say, if I haven't seen it, or they, oh, you really got to see it. And I say, all right, I'll try to make the time to see it. Then I guess I'm compelled to have to watch it then. But I'd much rather watch documentaries or other information. People send me links all the time. I'm in a very fortunate position that I can feel that a lot of people respect and like what I do, and then they want to support me, as you are with this interview and having this conversation. And I'm the kind of person that I want to learn from it. It's not just me shooting my mouth off telling you what I learned. I love it when, as you did with explaining what your take on Escaping Prison Planet was, help me understand. Give me some information. I love that. And as I said earlier, it is a lifetime of learning. It really is. There's just so much out there. And the fact that we have been, the embargo on truth has extended to the subjects that are really important, the ones that really matter the most, are the ones that we have the hardest access to gaining. And that's why I have included them in these 3 books. And that's really the nature of what the word esoteric means. It is information that is acquired by and used by a select few. In fact, when the rest of the population starts to understand this stuff, the nature of the word actually changes to exoteric. And so while there's still esoteric subjects, and in the decade, the 10 years that I've been researching and writing these 3 books, some of this information has started to go exoteric, most especially last Sunday with 60 Minutes doing an expose on UFOs. Now, they didn't really reveal much. They didn't get into it too much. But the fact that it's gone mainstream lets me know that everybody who has been endeavoring in UFO research, who has put up with the debunkers and the trolls shaming them, look, you're vindicated. You are now vindicated, because when this goes mainstream, that just means that they're finally playing catch up to what we've known for decades. Mm-hmm. I know one of the things we're supposed to talk about on this segment is UFOs and aliens, and perhaps this is the part where I say, look, this has been a very noble cause. As I've said in my interviews sometimes, you cannot endeavor to study a more important field than UFO and ETs, more collectively known as exopolitics. What are they doing here? What do they want? What do we want from them? And in the case, it's usually the military's wanting high technology and selling out the human race to get it. And that's where we have to understand. This is what abductions and cattle mutilations and so many other things are really all about. this being allowed to occur to our own people, usually unbeknownst to them or against their own free will. And that is a violation of karmic law, international law, that we all have our own choices to make. And if you're being taken against your will, that is illegal. And you can very much say, I do not agree to this probe. You have to take me back right now. And that's what I would say if I was ever abducted against my own will. Now, would I willingly go up on the craft? Well, that all depends on if those ETs are service to self or service to others. I would certainly love to make contact with service to others, the benevolent ET groups. Not so much with the malevolent ones. You may not be coming back in some cases. So this is why we have to understand this. And that's why I have a chapter, quite a controversial chapter in Beyond Esoteric called Being Aware of Predatory Species. And we are not the top of the food chain as we are led to believe. There are some malevolent ETs who are service to self, their own agenda, who look at us as a food source or chattel or livestock that are there to be exploited. And all these chapters, for me, I felt like I have a right to know this stuff. And then when I put them in the books, it's, okay, here you go. Now I'm giving it to you. If you want to know this stuff, it's there for you. A lot of people have no interest, call me names without even looking at it, without even knowing anything. But hey, that's their karma, right? The people that deny this, what was it, the doubting Thomas parable in the Bible? He came around. He finally saw the error in his ways at the end. But it doesn't really bother me that people are just going to wake up at their own pace. And it's always been the way it's been. So the day I decided that I'm not going to fight back or defend myself or even start posting controversial stuff after I started getting censored by Facebook, it was actually a very liberating moment, feeling that I put my best foot forward during the period when it was free exchange on the social medias before the censorship came around. I did the best I could. I defended my point. Strings of comments would go hundreds long sometimes, but I can't do it anymore. The game has changed. The golden age of information freedom, unfortunately, is past tense. We had it for about 20 years, and I'll tell you, it was absolutely instrumental in collecting so many data points to put together this 3-book series. If I was starting today, they would be probably just that one book. I would say a whole bunch of information has either gone into the dark web or just been swiped and gone. So it was a very auspicious time when I was working on this series of books to have the information at my fingertips, to be able to double and triple and quadruple check sometimes these sources and try to connect data points. And basically what that means is I look at certain subjects with as many viewpoints, articles, experiential witness testimony as possible. Good example I use is the Roswell crash in 1947. I wasn't alive then, you weren't either. So all we can do is look at the data points and kind of vision it like a bell curve. Okay, on one end of the bell curve, there is a couple authors that say that crash was a German craft, some that say it was a Japanese craft, and it's just really those authors that say it. By far, the majority of data points are on the top of that bell curve. They are the witnesses, the Max Brazels whose crash it landed on, to even government and military men coming forth later in life, sometimes even deathbed confessions. Those I find are the most authentic, because then they can finally speak their mind. And then when they die shortly thereafter, you think, wow, okay, this is pretty much that person's final testimony that's got to weigh for something. And then on the other end of that bell curve, you have the government's explanation of what happened to Roswell, which continues to change. Oh, it was a weather balloon. Oh, the aliens were crash test dummies, which weren't even invented till the 1950s. So it's just ridiculous. So you can really, in that case, throw the baby out with the bathwater, because they're the only ones saying that, really the only ones believing their own make-believe account. But by far, it was a crash. It had one survivor, and that is the survivor that gave the alien interview account, according to McElroy, this woman, which has a very surprising ending. I won't give it away, but I sent the link over to you. If you could put it up on the chat, people can check that out. All that this ET has said to the one person, the only one person who would speak with her telepathically, and then every day she would transcribe it out to all the military people watching and observing. But somehow she ended up with a transcript, and then years later found a researcher who she could believe and trust, and went forward with getting this information out on her deathbed. So once again, that should tell you that when somebody does this at the very end of their life, and they've been holding this secret for so long, and in fear of their own well-being or their family, and then when they finally come out with it, that should tell you something, that this is probably an honest testimony of what this person had to say.
Well, and you mentioned AI too, and that's a whole different. Maybe we should have you back, and we can actually talk about AI. But
Sharnael.
I just had Carrie Cassidy on, and she actually interviewed David Adair.
Oh, that was a fantastic interview. Recommend everybody watch that.
And just the whole concept too of how, David had asked Sophia, the AI in Saudi, how she got, if she had mastered emotions, and Sophia said that she got that in 48 hours, no biggie, basically. And how you had mentioned earlier, like, it takes lifetimes, and even in lifetimes, we don't necessarily get it, let alone. But he said, how did you do that? And she said that she had the cloud. And I'm like, oh my God. So, with our normal human capabilities with IQ and what have you, but they got all these like extra gigabytes on top of the cloud. I mean, yeah, that could be an interesting thing. And then not to mention alien AI. So, and they're all interfacing with one another, because when he came back from Saudi, his AI was actually already knew that she had been, they were already talking. His AI and the Saudi Sophia had talked. And so how much more is our Alexa, if you have one, and whoever talking to the governmental, and how does that work with Looking Glass? So if the White Hats have Looking Glass, and we're making all these choices based on that, and then the Black Hats have their AI and they're looking at their Looking Glass, what happens if the two Looking Glass AIs are talking to one another and they got their end game and they're like, screw the humans, we just want this outcome, so let's tell them to do this and then we'll get our way. It's like, anyway, I would love to have that conversation with you.
By the way, this is the yellow cube. This is the Looking Glass technology.
Is it?
Yep.
Nice.
Well,
okay.
My interpretation and my designer, but basically
Awesome.
that's my concept, to put it on the cover, and the different subjects in the book are on the yellow cube.
Awesome.
And, yeah. So,
well, how can we find you until we have you back? Which I need to go ahead and I'll get off the phone and we'll work on a new one. But how can everyone find you and start researching in between the interim here?
Sure. If you want to know more about me and some of the other projects I work on, bradolsen.com, just as you see there on the screen. And CCC Publishing, 3C's Publishing, one word.com, is the book publishing site where you'll find all the esoteric series, other books I've written. And I also, in my professional capacity as a publisher, work with other authors and have their books on cccpublishing.com. If they're of my books, then and you order off of the website, I can sign them for you. It's about the only way to get a signed copy. Otherwise, I've got a YouTube channel called the Esoteric Series, or CCC Publishing, a way to search for that, including the audiobook version. So I'm very big on giving away my content if I can. You can read about it for free using the Google Books app on CCC Publishing. If you got enough time to read off the screen, you can read my books for free. You can also listen to them for free on my YouTube channel when I was recording the audiobooks for Modern and Future Esoteric. So I want to make this stuff accessible. I keep the price tag as low as possible, only $19.95 for a 480-page book. And it's my service to all to do this. And I'm very glad I made this decision. I have no regrets not writing code or selling out to the corporate world. I'm sure I'd be a multimillionaire by now, but that doesn't matter. This stuff you don't take with you when you leave. And what you do take back is the love that you've generated in the world. And I think that is the key point to leave it here on the life review. You generate and exhibit the goodness that you've done in the world. And that's all that really matters. So take that with you. And I know you do, Dr. Sharnael. You're wonderfully manifesting goodness in the world, and it will pay off in the end.
Awesome. Yes. And then just exactly what you said. It literally matters. We can matter love, and we can bring that manifestation of love, truth, peace, and all the great things that source code is. So thank you for all you're doing for everybody, and just appreciate you coming back on with us, and we'll definitely get you back and have some more conversations about other things. And maybe by then I'll have the second book too, and maybe even finish reading them. I've just had some personal stuff going on with family that I haven't got to read like I normally do, but thank you. And thank you everybody who's watching. We appreciate you guys so much. Please do your due diligence and connect with Brad in all the different ways and watch his stuff. I'll be excited to see you on whatever this venue is that is a secret that you'll be able to talk about later, and we'll connect with that too. But you guys go to swiftfire.org if you can. Get the newsletter. That way, no matter where I am or what's going on with interviews, you guys can tap into that. Tomorrow I have Alina on. She has her new book, Alien Races. Also, Craig Walker will be co-hosting that with me, so I'm excited to have him back. I have Mel K and Ann Vanderstill tomorrow, and also Santos is going to be with us tomorrow night. We're going to talk about the pineal gland, pituitary, sacred geometry, and quite a few other cool stuff. So you guys definitely go to swiftfire.org and grab the newsletter so you know where we are. This is probably going to be taken off of YouTube, but I will be putting it up on Rumble and BitChute. So, all right, Brad, thank you so much again. And over now, on to your next interview. And I'll be in touch with you for sure. I appreciate you so much for all you're doing for all of us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Can't wait for the next time.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.